Does anybody have any questions before we start? The finale. We made it. The last one. Let's see. Riley, you had a question, right? She doesn't even know it, but she does, yes. Those of you, we had a handout last time, is what I told her to re-ask you. So. Okay, so who wasn't here last time that didn't get the fair tax? And let me just start with you guys here, just kind of pass those back, circulate them around. It's just a handout that is a PDF on this website as well. So I want to pick up there for starters today so that you get an idea of what your assignment is with the fair tax review. So let's, if you got your syllabus handy, you could pull it out. And I actually have a handful of syllabi left, so I will let these go to the masses. I don't know where mine is. So on the page 2 of your syllabus, we've got the assignments to do a general review of the fair tax and a one subtopic review of your choice, and I'll explain that in a moment. So go to fairtax.org, that's what's on the screen. Review various subtopics to potentially review. The review should be stapled, typed, double-spaced, 300-word minimum, 1,000-word maximum. That is an edit because I'm not going to have you turn them in physically this semester. I'm going to put it on Blackboard for you to upload to it. So there'll be a folder on Blackboard for that, and I'll have to edit it. There's not one there now. But that'll be my plan. So you should include a short summary of the fair tax in general, and then a short summary of your subtopic. An economic personal opinion of the subtopic and fair tax would be a good thing to include. And an excellent paper would explain points brought up in your discussion with a graph of a simple economic model. The article review is due on Monday, after spring break. So Monday after spring break. And the other item you need to do is a 60-second video presentation. In addition to your written material, you're going to give kind of an elevator pitch, is what we call. So look into the camera. Do not just read from a sheet. Assume that your audience knows the basics of the fair tax. So that's me, your audience, and so you're getting into your subtopic more. So assume that your audience knows the basics of the fair tax and you're just giving a quick elevator pitch about your subtopic. You may have to talk fast, and that's okay. 60 seconds will blow by. I used to do this for 30 seconds, but that was too short. So 60 seconds will go very fast. You'll have to kind of be zipping it out. So, all right, any questions about the fair tax project? I don't know. I mean, you're welcome to if you can. I don't know. You mean your 60-second video? Can you upload it? So the only problems I've had with videos is you got to make sure that it's in like an MP4 or something that I can open up on the other end. Sometimes your phone might have a specific type of software that's running the video. So that's the only thing. And I think if you look at your video after you upload it, if you go to your laptop and see if you can open your video, that should tell you whether it works or not. Unless it's using some other proprietary software. But otherwise I got, QuickTime and Windows, whatever, and so they open up different formats. So make sure it's in that type of format.
If you use like your smartphone or you use the Blackboard app, you can upload the video that way and it automatically converts it.
Oh, cool. Okay. So yeah, those of you who are not in the dark ages like me with a Windows phone, you have the ability to have the Blackboard app, but I'm pretty sure I can't get the Blackboard app. I haven't even checked lately, but when the app first came out, they don't do it for Windows. So that probably, does anybody have a Windows phone in here, just out of curiosity? You had one? I like it. I mean,
I like the operating system for the marketplace.
yeah, the marketplace is, and you guys are all, I'm not into the apps and games, so that doesn't really matter to me. It's more important for my Microsoft Word and Excel all works better on the Windows phone because it's all compatible. So anyway, so any questions there? So let's talk about the subtopic. So on this site, they have lots of information. So if you click this, I must have this blown up or something. This looks too big. No. Okay. All right, so how it works. This has information similar to what I just told you, kind of the basics of the fair tax right here on the page. This is an active movement, so you're going to be solicited to donate some money. Of course, I'm not expecting you to donate any money. I haven't donated any money to it, but I've been promoting this thing for about 15 years. So this is active legislation in front of Congress and the Senate, both at a state level and at a federal level. So this is a bipartisan type thing. What does bipartisan mean? Both sides. Yeah, it's not really Democrat or Republican. I think a little more Republicans probably buy into it, but there's lots of Democrats that do too, because it's revenue neutral. Remember how we were trying to make this not really political at all, that it's just a different way to collect taxes. That message is kind of hard to get out to the public because people, A, don't maybe want to learn. They're comfortable with the way things are. There's nothing harder to change than the status quo. Even though most economists would probably support this because economists have been talking about a consumption tax for a long time. It's just way more efficient from society standpoint for some of the reasons that we talked about on Wednesday. And so it would abolish the IRS and we would collect all taxes through the cash register, through a sales tax. And so the amount of tax collections this organization estimates would be sufficient at a 23% tax rate at the cash register. And that seems kind of shocking to think that you're going to run to the store and be zapped with a 23% tax. But people tend to forget, oh yeah, I get my whole paycheck, right? So now you've got 100% of your paycheck. If you put in 10 hours of work and you make $10 an hour, your paycheck reads $100, period. None of that. All other stuff that you see on your paycheck gets funded through the sales tax. So we're not talking about programs. That's why it's bipartisan. We're not getting into how much money should we spend on education. Those discussions are going to continue to go on. This is strictly on how we collect tax. Okay, any questions or comments so far? So, moving along these tabs, let me first show you the research one. So on this drop down, we've got agriculture business. So if you're a farmer or something, you might want to, how would this fair tax impact farming? So you click that tab, and there is multiple research documents here that just explain, they're not necessarily research, but they're just explanations about how the fair tax would impact those issues. So we've got benefits to farmers and ranchers, commodity prices, blah, blah, blah. So you can kind of start to scroll through that. If you're interested in business, we talked a little bit about this last time, what happens to retail business, small business, charitable giving is one we didn't talk about. There's just so many issues that are pretty interesting economic issues if we would switch things around. Finance and investing, what happens to interest rates? So if you're into financial markets, you could look there. Real estate is one of my favorites. How does that work? So just meant for you to kind of scroll through and find a topic. This would be getting into your subtopic about specifically how would this impact this area of interest for you. Okay, questions there? Is everybody clear on the subtopic idea? That you're drilling down a little deeper on a specific thing?
So just to get a subtopic, we just go to that section and then pick one of the...
Yeah, start looking at the titles, just kind of like what I'm doing here. If you think industry would be interesting, the fair tax lowers the cost of U.S. produced automobiles. Maybe that's interesting. the fair tax impact on education, if you care about education, right? So healthcare, all of these things are all separate. And let me click on one here. So let's say, let's look at education since we're in class. You'll have this, what they call a white paper sometimes. And it'll be just more details, about 4 pages of stuff that you can look at and learn about. Okay, yeah?
So then we have to use a graph, or some people use a graph, so we use a graph daily, or?
So no, good question. I would not want you to you could add this to your paper, but that's not what I'm looking for. I want you to use one from class, maybe a supply-demand curve or something. This is just a regurgitated table or bar chart or line chart. Totally fine to put in there. It might be appropriate for you to add it, but the little extra twist is critical thinking about, what did I learn this semester? How does that apply here? What are some of the things that I could apply? Okay?
Do we need to put that graph in our video?
You could. You have enough time. 60-second video is wide open for you. So if you wanted to, remember that guy we talked about, or that we did on Monday, I think, with the debt versus deficit, talked a million miles an hour. Throw up a quick chart. You could just do the old, and here you see, this will work, or whatever. So yeah, totally up to you. Anything else? Be creative, have fun. You're good? No. Nope. The 60-second video is you mano a mano with me talking to the camera. Here's the pitch. Like I said, you can do this as long as your face stays on screen. You need to be kind of talking eye to eye to the camera. Can you what? Do one of the raps? No. Well, if you wanted to do it yourself, that'd be awesome. I did have. Do you guys know Luke Parnell?
Yes.
Okay. He did a fair tax song for his project, so that's wide open. I'm telling you, it's all you. He hand wrote his a whole song, played guitar for his thing. So, anything else? The fair tax video song. He's graduating this semester, I think, too, or attempting to anyway. Okay, so frequently asked questions. That might lead you in a couple questions if you're just kind of cruising around, seeing what this is like. If you want to have a fun conversation with your parents or relatives or somebody, throw this at them. Say, hey, my professor thought maybe it'd be a good idea to abolish the IRS. What is that crazy professor talking about? We can't do that. And then you can point them to this website and says, well, it's not as crazy as it sounds. Once you start digging into it a little bit deeper, you might even be able to convince yourself that the world might be a better place with just a tax at the cash register. So here's little videos on the news. These are little short videos. Some of them are longer than others. So on this Get Involved, I did want to show you this, that there's state fair tax websites as well. There's a pretty active group in Kansas. We're close to having something like this passed to abolish the state income tax in Kansas. And so if you click on Kansas or whatever state you're from, there's likely another movement there. This has kind of been a grassroots effort to try to raise awareness and see if we can take down the man. That's why I've been telling college kids that you guys, hopefully down the road, we might get enough of you young people out there that might be open to something new that might make the world a better place. So this has the local Kansas stuff. Here's our local senators that support the bill. There's actually a fair tax bill on the floor that's been brought up. Here's Lynn Jenkins. I think she's a Democrat, if I remember right. She's Republican. So there we go, abolished, and there's a little documentary film here on their video library, lots of little links and stuff. So some cool stuff. Hopefully it'll stick in your noggin even after you leave Ottawa, that maybe this will be something down the road. All right, so questions, comments? I think that's all I wanted to show you on the website, just to kind of get you clicking through. Yes?
Or subatomic cash technology in that research tab.
Yes. Yeah, I want you to focus on the stuff that's here. Yes. you're free to add other commentary or stuff if you want to on your opinion. And you certainly don't have to agree with it, but...
I missed this because I came in a little late, but what's your expectation on the paper length and word count?
Just that you hit, what did I say, 300 to 1,000 words? Word count, 300 to 1,000. So it's not meant to be it's not a big research paper. Obviously, there's enough material here you could do a significant, people have. And academics have written more journal article type. There's 30-page documents in here. And actually, I picked up one on charitable giving that I plan on reading later that I found that I hadn't seen before. Okay, so that's our fair tax. Let's see, what did we leave off with last time? Can't remember if I need to continue on with something or start fresh. Were you here last time? Okay, we got into the tax and I did the PowerPoint, yeah. And that's what led us into the fair tax. All right, so I got a few more things to look at. And before we do that, I would like to do a little experiment, kind of. And basically, think about the allocation of resources in a democracy. So this is kind of a hot topic. There's countries around the world that are trying to become more democratic. And what does that mean to be a democracy? For the people, by the people, so you get to vote, basically, right? So, and some places have dictators, essentially, that were in office from a democracy. So those two things are not one and the same. So you can have an elected person get into office that is really a communist regime. What we found over time, though, is that the person who's in power will rig the election anyway, and so the democracy is kind of a fake democracy. It's not really serving the purpose that we'd want it to. So my thing I'd like to do here is a little experiment on voting, and think about the allocation of things. So where's my markers? So here's my question. In fact, let me get the attendance sheet floating around too. So my question is, let me give you two allocations. Yeah, that'll work. So, allocation A0 gives us a nice equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's 10 individuals in society, and each person has 2 goods, whatever they are. Maybe they're 2 Red Bulls or 2 Starbucks or whatever. So that's one allocation of goods in the economy. And then we've got another allocation. Let's call it AD. That looks like this. 19, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And so in this economy, one person's got 19 of the goods, one person has 1, the rest have nada, nothing. Okay, so that's the setup. Now, this one doesn't seem too fair, right? Is it possible that we could ever have this allocation come about in a democracy, where we start with this fair, evenly distributed, no income inequality or whatever? So we got perfect equality on the output, is it possible for a democracy to lead to this outcome that's really unfair through voting? So, I mean, we would take votes. Everybody gets an equal vote. Everybody's treated equally of the 10 people here. So through a voting process, could we start here and end here through a vote? Would that ever happen in society where we started off like this and only through voting? So this is an economic model. I'm not bringing in outside factors. This is our model right here. This is our supply and demand, if you will. This is the parameters of the model so far. So that's the question I'm posing. What's your gut feeling? I mean, you can tell I'm teeing you up a bit, right? But what's your gut feeling? I mean, would that ever happen in a democracy where everybody has a fair vote? How? If you're saying yes, because I don't see it without me showing you what we're going to do. Like I said, I'm teeing you up, but how?
Well, during the post-industrial revolution, I mean, didn't a lot of the economy rest in people like the railroad barons and the iron?
Yes, but you're bringing in all kinds of external factors. So I'm asking you, in the context of this economic model, we know how restrictive economic models can be. I'm saying, starting from this position, could we get to this position? What's that?
Specialization, you do more of that 19.
How, though? Like, why would this person ever vote? Why would this person ever vote for this allocation? See what I'm saying? All right, so now I got everybody teed up. So, how many people out there, if you got this for free, would read it? 1, 2, come on up. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Who else? Free book. You can sell it on eBay if you want, so you don't even have to read it, but I'd like to find somebody who might be interested in reading it. So we got all guys up here. Come on, ladies. Let's, Riley, good. Sarah, good. Okay, so I got to stop here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Perfect. All right. So, you guys are all going to get kisses today from me. I know this is getting kind of weird fast, isn't it? So everybody gets 2 kisses. All right? There you go. There you go. All right. I screwed up already because I was actually going to do 9 and I was going to be number 10. So we'll let Tag be the agenda setter. So here's the thing, that part of our assumptions of this democracy. Number 1, if you get more, you vote yes. Okay? So that's one of our things in economics. If you get more, you like that, and so you would vote yes. Number 2, if you get less, you vote no. And then the last one's pretty important, as you'll start to see. If you stay the same, you abstain. Because you're indifferent, right? So if I just leave you in the same position, you're like, I don't care, I got better things to do in my time than go to the voting booth, right? So that's a little dose of rational ignorance is what economists call that. Rational ignorance is that it might be better, it's too costly to go, it's not going to affect me anyway, so screw it, I'm not going to go. All right, so let's try an allocation here. Maybe I won't make you the dictator. I'll just kind of see where this game ends up. Okay, nope, hold on. Nope. Oh, this will work, but let's do it this way. So I get a nice new reallocation in society here. Okay, so all in favor of this new allocation, raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. No. Motion passes. Reallocation done. Let's see here. What should we do next here? Let's see. I got to make sure I don't screw this up because I could screw this up. Okay. Got it. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. There you go. You look like you'll do a good job for society. There you go. And there you go. And there you go. All right. So here's our new allocation of scarce resources in the economy and final goods. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. 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 The ayes have it. New allocation done. All right. So let's see. Now we're cooking here. Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir. There you go. There you go. And there you go.
I was one away.
So we got a new allocation on the table. All those in favor, raise your hand. In favor? All right. Those opposed, raise your hand. Motion passes. No, you're out. Motion passes. New allocation stands. All right. So now. Sorry. Let's see. I got to think about this. Sorry.
I'm back.
All those in favor of this new allocation, raise your hand, please. All those opposed? Oops, wait, I did screw up, didn't I? Give me one of those here. All those in favor of this motion, raise your hand. Those opposed? All right, motion carries. And now we get the final. Boop. And not quite there. I screwed something up here. I can take that. Yeah, but I want to, I need him to vote. All right, close enough. You guys get the picture here. Maybe I need to work on this a little bit more. All right. All those in favor? Those opposed? All right. So hopefully you get the picture here. I did screw up somehow. I wasn't following. I have it done in my notes, but and we can do a couple permutations, but I think you get the picture, right? So it's important that we have power dispersed and knowledgeable voters, right? So that we don't end up in a regime that we don't like someday because we're rationally ignorant and don't vote. We might get to a situation that we don't like. All right, so Jeff, there you go. You are the dictator winner today. All right, go take your seats.
Hey, you're the first one to raise your hand, right? Yeah. I think the first one to raise his hand.
All right, it's a marketable item if you want to go. All right, so then we can have kisses for all. The dictator should pass these around here. You guys can put these on your notes here. Here, take a kiss and pass it around. Yeah, there you go. Put on your name tag. Take your kisses. Money for everybody. All right, so democracy isn't necessarily all it's cracked up to be, and we can get outcomes that aren't that desirable. So for your notes, let me write down. In fact, I won't do exactly what we just did since I screwed it up anyway. Then this might be good. You guys can see how it could have went. So with A1, so let's jump from here to here. With A1, I did the 4, 4, 3, 3, 3, 3. So we went 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 0, 0, 0. And we were able to get that motion to pass. Then we went to A2. And if we give this person some, and this person some, and this person some, and this person some, and we leave a couple other people screwed, then that motion passes 4-3, or 4-2. A3, if we keep this person the same, oh, that's what I didn't do. Yeah, I could have kept it loaded that way. Okay. 6, 7, 7, 0. Now we've got a 2-1 because we kept this one the same. And then 0, 0, 0, 0. I'd had too much. I was just being too freewheeling with my cache here. So this one passes 2-1. And then I think we can probably do this quicker than this, but let's just copy what my notes are. 10, 10, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So now we've got two people with 10. This is the final blow here that I missed out on. Because now we zap the one person and we go 19, 0, 1, 0, 0. And we did it. It took a few rounds to get there, but through teeing up a number of Democratic votes, we were able to eventually get to this distribution that we don't think would be very good. My major professor in my PhD program for public economics did this thing for us, and it was a real eye-opener. And I've done it in my principles classes for a while, and I actually resurrected it since I've been here at Ottawa. And I'm like, who should I give credit to for this? Because I thought it was from something or other. And I emailed my old major professor I hadn't spoke to for a while, and I said, yeah, who was this? He's like, I have no idea. So I just have to make that disclaimer that I didn't make this up. This is really cool, I think. It kind of helps show a point, but I don't know who to give credit for, and I tried to figure it out. But all right, comments or questions there? All right, so careful with your systems that you agree with, and watch out for rational ignorance. You'll see it crop its ugly head in a few places in your life. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is what's called supply side economics. Okay, so supply side economics. So the supply siders in general believe that a decrease in taxes would lead to additional incentives to work so that the supply side of the equation would get bigger and perhaps even have tax revenues go up. So the supply side argument is that a decrease in taxes will lead to more incentive to work and therefore possibly not cause tax revenue to fall. A decrease in taxes will lead to more incentive to work and therefore possibly not cause tax revenue to fall. So remember, big T is our tax revenue, is equal to, we can look at it a couple different ways. Let me take it times T. I'm struggling a little bit because I think this will prove the point a little bit better than what I'd normally do. Let me do it two ways. This is what we've done the whole semester, but I want to capture this supply side argument a little bit better. So we could also think about T times your nominal wage times your quantity of labor. So with the fair tax, this is your paycheck. I make $10 an hour. I work 10 hours. 10 times 10 is $100. And then the government takes some amount away. Let's say it's 20%. The government gets $20 of tax revenue. With me? So this is the way we think about it with our total income. This is our income kind of broke down into its pieces. So our tax rate times our income. Now if we break it down into pieces, what the supply siders are arguing here is that we'll have more people working. So even if we cut the tax rate, if T goes down, that would cause, holding all other things constant, remember, that would cause this whole expression to go down and tax revenues would fall. However, if quantity goes up because people are incentivized to work, now we've got two competing things going on, right? So more people go to work, even though the tax rate's less. If this arrow is bigger than this down arrow, if the up arrow is bigger than the down arrow, then the overall effect over here is for tax revenues to go up. A supply side effect that people traditionally didn't think about. Because the traditional logic is government needs more taxes. How do they do it? They increase the tax rate. So the supply side argument kind of takes that and says, wait a second, you're ignoring a supply side effect that could make the answer a little different, or certainly maybe not as big of an effect. Okay, so a guy by the name of Art Laffer created the Laffer curve. And there's kind of an interesting story behind this. In the 1980s, he got appointed to the Council of Economic Advisors for Ronald Reagan. And he was at a bar and wrote on a napkin what is now called the Laffer curve. So imagine a couple guys having drinks. It wasn't Ronald Reagan. It was one of the other people in there. And he said, well, listen, what if taxes work like this? What if we look at the tax rate on the horizontal axis, and we think about tax revenue here? That relationship between the tax rate and the amount of revenue collected is not just an ever-increasing curve. One way to logically think about that is that if the tax rate is 100%, would you go to work? No, right? So if this goes up to 100, and you're not in the business of doing charity for whoever your employer is, you just make this be 0. Screw it, I'm not going to work. So if you start to think about 100% being over here, and except for those souls who would still want to work for free, the Laffer curve might look something like this. It's a parabola, right? A little mountain. meaning that there is some sort of tax rate that maximizes tax revenue. This particular rate would make tax revenue the highest. If you go beyond that rate, then tax revenues will actually start to fall. So that's the Laffer curve concept, and Laffer is a supply sider. Well, this is that napkin. So, what it says on this napkin, there's some people down here. There's me. That's Art Laffer. And that is Paul Volcker, who was the chairman of the Federal Reserve in the 80s when Wayne Angel Snyder School of Business, I'm the Wayne Angel Chair of Economics, when Wayne Angel served with Paul Volcker in the 80s. And so Art Laffer served on Reagan's Council of Economic Advisors, chairman of the Federal Reserve, and then Wayne Angel here. And this is our current provost, Terry Haynes. This was at an event that we had in New York. So this napkin, I had this idea that I wanted to be able to do what I just did to you, that this is that napkin. So I brought a paper napkin that was kind of a high quality paper napkin that I wanted to frame like this. And so it was a little bit of a break between things. And so I went up to Art Laffer and I said, excuse me, I know you might get asked this, but would you be willing to sign this napkin? I'd like to use it. I actually brought this frame to New York with me because I wanted to show him that I was going to showcase it. I didn't know if he'd be up for signing it or what. He's like, oh, come with me, come with me. And so he's like, he goes and sits down and he's like, there's a big pile of napkins that were ready for the event that day. And he's like, well, it's easier to ask for forgiveness and permission. And he just grabbed, I'll ask him later. So he grabbed the napkins this is a cloth napkin from the New York kind of swanky hotel we were at. And he grabbed the cloth napkin and got out his marker. And he wrote, to Russ McCullough, this is the only curve I'll ever throw you, Art Laffer. So I'll send this around. Turns out Art is just a card. He's super funny. He spoke at this event we were at, and I had no idea. I'd never heard him speak before going to that event. Again, it was back in the 80s, so I learned about the Laffer curve and stuff in my undergraduate classes. So that is the concept of the Laffer curve. So the question is, what is T star? You know, that's the big question mark. What is the amount that's too high? Does anybody remember what the current top marginal tax rate is currently in the United States? 35%, right? So right in that 30s range. And what was it historically as high as? 91 we saw on that table the other day, right? 70% was when Reagan came into office. So Laffer was looking at a 70% tax rate, and what he was able to sell President Reagan on was that, hey, I think we're on this side of the Laffer curve. If you cut taxes, it should lead to an increase in tax revenue. Now this gets a little more complicated because then we're only talking about the very wealthy, right? Those people that are in that high income bracket, which might be, I don't even know what it was at the time. It was probably $500,000 worth of income or something. You know, every dollar above that was getting hit with 70%. But that was the concept. And so our current marginal rate here is at 35%. And people still argue whether there's a good supply side effect currently. If it's okay to raise to 39 we talked about last time, so this is up for debate. Other people would say that's still too high. I think it would be better to lower it. Then we get into what are you doing with the taxes and all kinds of fun stuff. But that's the idea of the Laffer curve, which is an important concept to comprehend, that at least acknowledging that we have two competing forces going on here with the quantity of labor supplied and the tax rate.
But like in the book, it showed France curve at like 87.
Yeah.
How-
Yeah, so France is, I mean, in my opinion, yeah, way over here. And France's productivity, by the way, is very low too in terms of per capita GDP. They're half of the United States, maybe not half. I think they're in the 30,000 range.
Well, if that's the case, then why does the book show them at like the tip of the Laffer curve and then it drops off?
Well, that is really shown there to be conceptual. I think it says T star. I don't know about it, if it shows it at the peak. I don't have my book here to look, but it doesn't matter. They're just trying to say that conceptually there's a maximum point. They might have had, I thought 70 was on this side for that graph. I know which one you're talking about, but
it had like the US at like 35, then the UK at like 50 or something like that,
Yeah.
and then at the top was France like 85.
okay. And maybe if they increased it any more, it would go down. Their tax revenue, it would be one way to interpret that. But the thing that is important is that with the marginal tax brackets, you have to look within the bracket to see what the effect would be. So if you're poor, like we were talking about, your effective tax rate at the margin might only be 10%. So you're way down here. And so we might be able to raise taxes on you and collect more revenue. But that goes against our Robin Hood theory of the progressive tax with the rich paying proportionately more than the poor do. And so that's usually not too favorable. And then Jeff brought up the middle class. Same thing there. We start to think about how much the lion's share of tax does come from the middle class, but it's because the middle class is huge with the numbers. Yeah, most of the quantity of income is from the middle class. And so kind of by default, that's where most of the revenue comes in, and therefore it's a little more sensitive if you are going to lower tax rates and you're on this side of the Laffer curve, tax revenues will fall. And our government's already busted for the most part, right? With our deficit currently at $1 trillion plus. And so that's not really an option. The options that they're really looking at is let's keep the middle class fixed, and then maybe we'll hit those rich people a little harder, is kind of the discussion. Okay. Any other questions or comments there? All right, so that is the Laffer curve. So the next thing I want to look at, and I think we're getting close to the last thing, so we'll probably be getting close here. It'll take a little bit to work through this one. And that is getting a little more detail on the deficit. That there's kind of different types of deficit. And so what I want to look at is the response of tax revenues. So cyclical, and structural deficits. It's kind of our title here. Okay, so I want to measure real GDP on the horizontal axis. I'll fully write it out here, even though we normally think of those two things as interchangeably, remember? And over here we're measuring dollars. And so I want to graph tax revenues. So if we're talking about the deficit, let me back up one step. If we're talking about the deficit, what is that again? What's our equation goggles for the deficit? G minus T, good. So remember that we talked about the plus versus the minus here, but G minus T. So government spending, if it exceeds tax revenue collected, then we have a deficit. We're in the hole. So what I want to first graph is the T function. What happens to tax revenues as income climbs? Is that an upward sloping or downward sloping function, or is it horizontal? So what's happening to T, so tax revenue, as real GDP goes up, moving along the horizontal axis this way? Is that an upward sloping function, downward sloping, or flat? Positive relationship, right? So as incomes grow, then the government gets more money. And that's what we just did with our equation there, with little t times real GDP times our income. So if the tax rate is 20% and income is $1,000, the government gets $200. If income grows to $2,000, the government gets $400. So if we were to map that out at 1,000 and 2,000, we'd clearly have a point here at 200 and then another one at 400. We'd have an upward sloping line. All right, so let's just draw a straight line, which is what it would be with a flat tax, by the way. So there's our T function, tax revenue. And it's big T, not little t. What does the G function look like? So now, from the government's perspective, what do you think that looks like as income grows, the amount of spending that would be going on by the government? This one's a little bit different. So would it be going up for sure or not necessarily? Why do you say up, Kyle? Less steep slope, so you want them. And what's kind of your gut feeling driving that answer?
Got more money.
Okay, so I'm going to hold, we're kind of trying to divorce ourselves of that. So holding other things constant, like the tax rate is going to be held constant. If it was 20%, it's going to stay 20%. What would their spending behavior, would that necessarily change?
I think it's kind of subjective. I agree with Tim that the government's just like anybody else. If you have more money, you spend more money.
Okay.
But then on the other side, if real GDP is increasing, if the economy is doing well, then the government may be spending less on service.
Would we, because we have more income, would we buy more weapons of mass destruction so that we had extra amount? Or do we select our level of weapons of mass destruction based on our ability to defend ourselves? We base it on our need, right? So that could be argued a little bit, but for the most part, national defense might be a number that we pick. Okay, so that would look like this, right? If I say, hey, we got to have our military beefed up to this level. Remember that we're just measuring dollars here. And you know what? I want to make sure we have that amount in our arsenal because the terrorists don't care if we have a lot of money or a little bit of money. They're going to still try to kill us. And so I want to be ready, right? So I've kind of fixed the budget where we'd probably have that type of government spending be relatively fixed.
Even to that extent, if the government had more money, couldn't they upgrade certain stuff about our national defense too?
Yeah, I mean, that would get into some more of the details, but probably before the year starts, we'd have kind of an idea of what we want to do budget-wise, right? And it won't be dependent upon necessarily how many dollars come in. They're going to have that target. But you're right, there might be some adjustments made along the way when we start to get at it. But we're missing another important part. So that's one part of government where you can imagine government would spending would be fixed. But what other types of G do we have in our big picture. Remember, weapons of mass destruction was coming up to the output market, running to Guns R Us and getting our weapons. What was some other types of G that we learned about this chapter? Some other types of government spending.
Like welfare spending.
Okay. Welfare, unemployment claims, right? Special programs to help the needy, maybe, and that sort of thing. So those transfer payments. What happens to transfer payments as the economy heats up and we got lots of money? Those go down, right? So some of what the government does is called needs-based spending. Needs-based spending goes down when economy heats up. So in other words, with more income, we have less welfare, unemployment claims, special programs to help people in need. That's why we call it needs-based programs. So the need is by the person who's poor, unemployed, etc. And so as we have more income, those programs by default actually fall down because there's less unemployment claims. There's less people without a job that might be on some sort of assistance program of some sort. Bo.
So is that like for natural disasters? Is that what they have? Do they budget that?
Possibly. Yeah, that might be one thing. There might be less needed there. So with that, if we have the combination of weapons of mass destruction that looks like this and needs-based spending that looks like this, what is the two combined together going to look like? Downward sloping, right? So we got kind of that flat item, $100 million worth of weapons, and then we've got the needs-based component that falls. So if we add those two things together, we're going to get a downward sloping function. And so maybe it looks like this. So there's our G, government spending. And so I didn't want to kind of convolute the point. There might be some spending, like you were saying, that would go up slightly, but the reality is that this type of spending would overwhelm that, and so we'd still get this downward sloping look to it, right? All right, so what goes on right here where the two lines cross? All the fun in econ class. What is happening at the point where the two lines cross? Balanced budget. Boy, we don't see too many of those in the United States, do we? So where T equals G is YBB. It's the level of income that would lead to a balanced budget. The level of income that would lead to a balanced budget. So YBB is the level of real GDP that creates a balanced budget. Okay, so so we've drawn this graph lots of times. our roller coaster graph, where we've got real GDP measured over time. Real GDP measured over time. What was that again called? Begins with a B. Nope. But thank you for trying. I'll give you an extra credit point for that wrong answer.
Business cycle.
Good. Business cycle. All right. So, as long as I got my pen handy in my hand, I'll give you an extra credit point too. So the business cycle. So these are the ups and downs of the economy, right? When we hear that the economy is expanding or the economy might go into recession, that's what we're looking at, is the business cycle. Okay, so when the economy is falling, what's happening to G, government spending? What's happening? Oh, recession's hitting. It's going up, right? Because now you can kind of think of that picture and how we're moving this way down the scale. And what's naturally happening to tax revenue? It's going down, right? Because we have less income, the government's bringing in less from their income tax. And so when that occurs at some level over here with a recession, let's just call it Y1, we have a deficit because the level of G is greater than the level of T by this amount. This vertical height here is the deficit. Now, as the economy comes out of recession and starts expanding, so our expansionary phase of the business cycle, what starts to happen to tax revenues? They climb, government spending falls, less welfare, less unemployment claims, and what do we call this? Because we don't see it very often at Y2. What do we call this when the government's collected more taxes than what they spent? A surplus, a government surplus. So that is so bizarre for us that we've got this surplus. And so the income tax and the needs-based spending end up being what we call automatic stabilizers for the economy. Automatic stabilizers. Automatic stabilizers. So, the income tax and needs-based spending automatically adjust, parentheses, without Congress or Obama or Janet Yellen for that matter, without the help of government, our tax system and our government spending system, by design, automatically runs a deficit and a surplus due to the fluctuations in the economy. And this is kind of a good thing, or perceived to be a good thing, that when the economy is falling and people need help, we run a deficit, and hopefully it softens the blow heading down, and maybe we can recover quicker. And likewise, when we're heading up, these taxes kick in, and there's more taxes being drawn, and the government spending went down, and a surplus tends to maybe put a drag on the system. so that we might start to have movement that is less uppy and downy, right? So we got these we got a smoother ride. Okay, so income tax and need-based spending automatically adjust without Congress, creating a built-in stimulus with deficit during recession, and a built-in drag when economy is overheating, if there is such a thing. That's, I almost hate saying that. If the economy is overheating, if it's growing a little too fast. Yes?
Then if the point falls on the trend line, wouldn't that be the balanced budget, technically?
Yeah, okay, so that's where we're going to get to. So right now, we know that this is where the balanced budget exists, right? And so our next thing to look at is where our potential level of real GDP is. And so if our potential for the economy is here, which is an if, so let's see what color can we use. A little red maybe. This thing almost looks done. I'm going to make it kind of fat. If our long-run aggregate supply curve, if you will, even though we're, we can kind of think of it as that, but really it's our potential for the economy. If our potential real GDP for the economy is right here, then we're saying what I think you were saying, is that if this is our trend line, then we tend to oscillate around potential. Our budget is designed to run a surplus when we need it and a deficit when we need it, right? So it's got this automatic stabilizing effect through the policies. Okay, nice in theory, but what's been going on in the United States for 30, 40 years? Deficit, 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 deficit. So do you think that we have does the evidence indicate that we have figured out a budget that is approximately on our potential level of real GDP? No way, right? The overwhelming evidence is that we're not doing that. Okay, so I want you to add a little bit of words that I wanted to hold off on. When this happens, this is what we call a cyclical deficit. We're going to decompose the deficit a little bit further. If the potential is where the balanced budget occurs and we run a deficit, it's a cyclical deficit, right? It was just due to the cycles of the economy. And same thing over here, this was a cyclical surplus. All right, so new graph. Let's see here. New graph, same graph, but just different ways here. So draw dollars here and real GDP here. Go ahead and draw your two lines crossing, that's fine. G and T. And we know that this is the level of GDP that would lead to a balanced budget. Where is, if we were graphing the United States then, where would we graph the United States' potential GDP relative to this picture? So if this is the U.S. budget situation, where does the potential level of GDP belong on this graph? To the left, right? So in other words, we have an automatic deficit, apparently, built into our system. We're right here. And so if you graph a line somewhere to the left of that, when the potential level of real GDP exists to the left, we're going to run a deficit even if we're operating at our maximum potential that we'd expect to be, our long-run potential. And so we call it a structural deficit. A structural deficit. A deficit that's not going away. This is the U.S. At least the last 30 to 40 years, our picture looks like this one. Okay, questions on that? What happens when we oscillate with this one? Did we get rid of the cyclical part? No. Now we've got an extra thing going on where if the economy falls down to Y1, we have this picture. The structural deficit is still there. Dot, dot, dot. My red line is still here. That hasn't gone away. But now I've picked up a little more deficit that's cyclical. So these two little orange guys here would be the cyclical part. Cyclical. So the cyclical part plus the structural part gives you the total deficit. Those two add. So we've decomposed the two concepts. All right, questions there?
It is still considered cyclical deficit if you fluctuate the other way to the point that you hit the equilibrium.
Right. So if we go this way, we'd have a the deficit would shrink. It would be temporary though, right? And so we'd have really a cyclical surplus that's offsetting some of the structural deficit. If I remember right, I don't think there's any homework problems that get that sophisticated, but that's what would be going on. And then if it went way over here, the deficit would go away, but eventually we'd be heading back here. So the structural deficit is a long-term concept. It's like we've got a structural deficit. What are we going to do about it? The politicians just do this. They kick the can down the road. We'll just talk about it next year. Next year comes around. We'll talk about it next year. We'll talk about it next year. We'll talk about it next year. So it always looks a little rosier to talk about it next year. And the generational imbalance that's discussed in your textbook when we get into Social Security. So Social Security, again, was take from the young, give to the old. It was always designed to be that way. It was never a 401k investment type plan. But it doesn't seem real fair if I get to enjoy the benefits of the deficit today. Right? So the government ran some crazy program, and it was called the McCullough program. And so they cut McCullough a check for $10 million, and that caused there to be a deficit, right? And during McCullough's lifetime, hopefully he'll live to maybe at least a ripe age of 80, but then he croaked. And that deficit now added to the debt, which now is going to be a burden on my grandchildren. You see the timing that went on there? McCullough got the benefit in 2015. People from another generation, when McCullough's dead, are going to pay for McCullough's enjoyment of that government program here. That doesn't seem quite fair. And so these generational transfers is the point where the United States is now. When you hear about people saying, well, I want my grandchildren to have a better place, well, we're not doing that. And so I think decent tax and spending policy tries to have the people who enjoy the benefits pay at least part of the freight within that generation, right? So if we're going to do the Robin Hood theory of take from the rich and give to the poor, take from the employed, give to the unemployed, let's keep it all in that cohort rather than the unborn babies. That's pretty lousy, isn't it, if you think about it? If we pass the buck to unborn babies, how big of a vote do they have in the voting box here in the democracy? Nothing. So that is a generational imbalance. And that's something to look careful at. That's not cool, really. And we do that type of thing quite a bit.
Is that something that the fair tax concept was going to fix?
Not really, because that takes a change in G.
Okay.
With the fair tax, the expectation would be that Y would increase. And so as we have more prosperity and we have more people getting off the couch and going to work, because a small business doesn't even have any issues, they can go rake somebody's lawn and get a $20 bill and they're not breaking the law, which they are doing now, by the way. All the babysitting that goes on, you go rake your neighbor's lawn and collect a $20 bill, unless you reported it to the IRS, you were illegal. You are a criminal. You are stealing from the United States government. Right? We don't think about it that way. We're like, oh, that's too harsh. But that is our system. You are supposed to report all income. If you look in the IRS tax code, you won't get a 1099 unless the person who paid you more than $600. They are not required by law to report it themselves as an expense. But in theory, you're supposed to claim that income. So by doing the fair tax, we decriminalize the nation, right? And we give people incentive to just go get a job, do some work, earn a paycheck. I think it would be so powerful with small business and so much easier for people to have incentive to just go to work because they get to keep every single dollar of their hard-earned money, and then the only way they pay taxes is by running to the store. That seems pretty fair. And remember, it's progressive because of the prebate. That was an important chunk of the pie there, that every single person's going to get a check. We didn't talk about this, but I think it's a neat thing for poverty, too. Imagine that we have the bum on the street. They're going to get that $2,000 check every month. And so if they can live real low, they're at least getting some minimal amount of funds. It's not meant to be a poverty alleviation thing, so I don't want to put too much, but I think it's kind of cool to think that every American would have some money coming their way through the system. Now, Warren Buffett gets it too, right? The richest Americans, the Koch brothers over in Wichita, they get that check too. Everybody gets it. Of course, nobody's stopping them from turning the check over and handing it over to their charity, right? So, I mean, they can do what they want with it, but they will ultimately everybody gets issued that check. Okay. Questions or comments there? All right. I think we just got one more thing. And that is evaluations. We're done, people. We're done. Now remember, your final's going to be the Wednesday after spring break. You do have to use pencils on this form. Does anybody need a pencil?
Does it have to be?
No, it can be any, yeah, I think any mechanical pencil is fine too.
Okay.
I'll write my name on the board here, and I could. Would somebody be willing to volunteer to bring these to the administration building after we're done? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Steven? I saw Steven. Okay. Oh, did you do it already? Were you here? I do want to actually upload it digitally. But since you brought it today, let me take a peek at it. But I will need you to upload it digitally. Cool. Glad to see you're on it. You got the video too? Okay. We can do that later. Did you get shorted? All right. My last name is MCCULLOUGH. MCCULLOUGH, Russ McCullough, and this is Eco 20163 is the course number. And then as soon as you're done, you can, I'm going to put the extras in here. Stephen will bring these to the administration building. There is room on the back, as you guys probably know, for comments. So if you got comments about the class, I look at those at the end as well. And so just slide them back in here. We'll be all set. I'll be on.